Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing Revolutionaries. The topic for this Revolutionaries, Sputnik Monroe. And if you're not familiar with this concept, this is my series of videos where I take and do a little bit of a deep dive on a wrestler and how they are revolutionary in the world of pro wrestling, how they've changed pro wrestling, and how they've been intrinsical with the sport, made the sport better, changed it for the better. On this one, we're talking about Sputnik Monroe. We're going to cover one topic. Usually I have at least one topic for the person. And you may or may not be familiar with Sputnik Monroe. He was a wrestler predominantly in the Southern Territories from the middle 1940s all the way up to 1988. A lot of his time he spent in Memphis. He's an absolute legend in the city of Memphis. And the reason why he's revolutionary is the same reason why he's a legend there. Let's go back to 1957. And this is, we're going to go over it here. Not only is Sputnik Monroe revolutionary in wrestling, he is revolutionary in the civil rights movement, period. Full stop. This is how he became revolutionary in pro wrestling. We're talking about the Jim Crow South, the civil rights movement of the late 50s into the 60s, still very much segregated. He was going into arenas where the first floor was whites, the upper decks were blacks, and I'm going to say whites and blacks. If that offends you, I do apologize, but just stick with this story. In the year 1957, Sputnik, who was a heel at the time, he had, and this is a story I've heard it a couple different places. I don't know if it's a folklore or it actually happened, but he had picked up a black hitchhiker and Sputnik was tired, so he let the hitchhiker drive his car, which is absolutely insane, black, white, or otherwise. I grew up, and I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent like you guys know I do, but I grew up at the very tail end of when picking up a hitchhiker was still kind of okay, and a couple times my family did it. It's very much not something that's done nowadays with cell phones and ride shares and all that stuff. But anyway, I digress. The story goes that Sputnik picked up this hitchhiker, let him drive his car. They got into an area, I think it was the arena or wherever he was going. Wherever he was going, they knew who Sputnik was, and all of the people there were disgusted with him. How dare he allow this black man to drive his car? How dare he associate with this black man? So as the story goes, Sputnik leaned into it, and being a smart businessman, a smart wrestler, he hugged the man and kissed him on his cheek, thus making him even more of a heel to the very much at the time racially divided fans. Now Sputnik, leaning into this and obviously not personally having any issues with being friendly or associating with people of a different color, he would start going to bars and going to restaurants that were for blacks only. He would go into these places where whites weren't supposed to be, or quote unquote weren't welcomed. The product of this is he started building a fan base within the black community, and they seen him as a hero, because what would happen a lot of times when he would go to these places, he would get arrested on charges, and look this up, this is a real thing, and this is all in Memphis, of mopery. I don't even know what that is. But it was basically a trumped up charge to arrest him. Here's the other genius move. When he would go to these court cases, which would inevitably get thrown out, or he would just pay a fine to get rid of them, he would always hire a black lawyer. Now you see where not only is he using his brain, not only is he trying to help the civil rights movement, but he's also realizing, for whatever you may take this as, I can make a crap ton of money off of this fan base that is not being served, that's not being catered to, that is being looked down upon. A black family's money spends just the same as a white family's money. And again, think Memphis. A lot of things in the civil rights movement happened in Memphis. Martin Luther King was shot in Memphis. There was a 1968 Memphis station workers strike. The Civil Rights Museum is the hotel where Dr. King was shot at now. So you gotta realize Memphis is a hotbed for racial unrest in the civil rights. There's a lot happening there. And here's this guy, this wrestler, who's tapping into that, and he's helping the cause. This is a guy that's seen by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people every week. And to a lot of the people, he's a heel. However, to some of the whites, I guarantee it helped change their perception. Because if it's good enough for Sputnik, well, why isn't it good enough for us? And it may have helped change their mind. Now, the biggest thing that he changed in wrestling with that is, again, I talked about it earlier, where it was very much segregated. Whites had the floor seats, blacks had to sit up in basically the rafters of the building. Sputnik was so popular that he would go to places and he would refuse to wrestle a match that he was promoted for unless his people could sit on the floor with the white. Now, this again was brilliant because there were a lot of shows that when it was segregated, the floor may not have been sold out, but the balcony was, and there were more blacks wanting to go to the show than there were whites. Historically, Memphis and Memphis wrestling had a very big fan base in the black community. Again, smart businessman, business, civil rights, put them together. What's good for business? Now, here's what happens. You go to a show in the early 60s, and this may be your first time you're sitting with a black person ever, or vice versa, sitting with a white person. And you start looking and you're cheering for the same guy. You're booing the same guy. You're talking to your kids in a similar way. You're buying them hot dogs. You're getting them to program. You're telling them to calm down when they act up. This intermingling helped so much because you started to realize, well, it's just stupid. And honestly, it is stupid. Racism is dumb. It's one of the dumbest things that we do as a people. Hating people just on the color of their skin or their nationality, it is absolutely bonkers to me. I was raised to not be that way, and it's insane that even now, I talk about 1957, that's when that car ride happened. 48 years ago. Almost 50 years before I'm recording this. We've had a black presidency. We've had black astronauts. We've had black Supreme Court members. Even with all of this, there's still racism in this country. And there's still pockets of people that hate you just because of the color of your skin. And it's so dumb. And I know I'm getting off on a little bit of a soapbox here. But when I think about it, and I think about the people that were willing to stand up like Sputnik Monroe, like Dr. King, like Malcolm X even. It's amazing that through all that people would stand up to tyranny. Through all that people would stand up to evil. I know I do these as how revolutionary they are to wrestling, and trust me, that is very revolutionary to wrestling. Without Sputnik Monroe and his contributions, and we're not even talking about the team he had with Norvell Austin, one of the first mixed race tag teams, and it was highly implicated that Norvell was his son. How crazy is that? The fact that this is less than 70 years ago, so 2 lifetimes ago. There are people in your family that were alive when this was happening. Your grandparents were alive when this was happening. If you still have them around, God bless you. God bless them. Talk to them. You really need to, because once they're gone, there's a whole history that goes with them. But anyway, I digress. His willingness to stand up to hatred changed wrestling. There's no New Day without him. There's no Ron Simmons without him. There's no Junkyard Dog in Mid-South without him. Hell, there's no Junkyard Dog Sylvester Ritter without the Junkyard Dog Norvell Austin, which was his nickname first. I digress. Him putting his stamp on Norvell Austin, that carried a lot of weight. All I'm saying is not only was Sputnik Monroe revolutionary in wrestling, he was revolutionary in the civil rights movement in Memphis in a time that it needed someone to stand up. And if you go back through the history, Memphis was the last territory to die. Memphis always was one of the strongest territories, whether it be Sputnik, whether it be Jackie Fargo, Jerry Lawler, Dutch Mantell, Austin Idol, all those guys, all revered. They were the biggest sports stars in that town in their time, and he lended his voice to a very noble cause. For that, Sputnik Monroe may be one of the most revolutionary wrestlers in the history of the sport. With all that being said, I do want to say one more thing before I get off here. I want to give a shout out to our members here: Nick Rusala, Michael Giacino, Jasper B, and Rusty Shackelford. I don't mention the members as much as I should, and I'm sorry about that. I want to give you guys a shout out here at the end of the video. I really, really appreciate it. It really helps me to purchase upgrades to my lighting, to my camera, to anything I have. Thank you so much for becoming members. I really do appreciate that. If anybody else would like to join, I'd appreciate that as well. Just clicking on my videos, I appreciate it. Clicking the like, commenting, sharing, all that does so much help to help the algorithm. I won't go into a long-winded explanation here. I did that on my last video at the end. Go watch that. You'll hear basically a call to action. I don't really like doing that because I feel like YouTube is something you do for fun. It's something, that it'd be beautiful if I could make this my living, but for the most part, I do it for fun to talk with you guys. But anyway, I digress. I told you I wasn't going to go on too long. With all that being said, much respect to one of the most revolutionary wrestlers of all time, Sputnik Monroe. You deserve all the respect in the world. My name is George Coles, and you've been watching Heel.